Welcome back, Warrior Fam.
Yay!
We're so glad you're here with us this and
Mhm.
every week.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh man, we had a good amount of anxiety before we hit record today.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. We just chatted for a while before hitting the record button about our
Yeah.
discomfort and anxiety around today's episode.
Yeah. It was one of those topics that is actually going to be bleeding into two episodes.
Yep.
We're going to be kind of keeping on a general theme for today and then for our next, Margot and Abby solo episode in a couple weeks. And we're going to be talking about anxiety surrounding being a woman in the world.
Yeah.
Being raised as a girl and then growing into a young woman and now a fully grown woman, even though in my brain I'm like, am I a fully grown woman? Yes. To remind myself. Yes.
You just made a reel today and you look so young and vibrant in it, you know?
Oh, please. Those are called filters, honey. Actually, no, I was pretty far away in that video. Maybe I didn't have a filter. I don't know. Anyway, warriors, getting off topic. I think it's because we have so much discomfort surrounding this topic that we've been dancing around it for a while, but it is one that we both agree that we have a good amount of anxiety or a good amount of experience feeling anxious surrounding just showing up as a female in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways of having that, like the pressure to have to perform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, the pressure to be emotionally available for others, but also you can't be too emotional. Right. But then there's like the anxiety of like walking alone at night, that's a big one for me, or the anxiety of like, for me, when I used to travel on the subways and stuff, like men getting too close to me in my space. Or the, navigating when men say inappropriate things, and just the ways that we, try to keep ourselves safe by like lightening the mood or pretending something didn't happen or, and so there's so many different things we could focus on. But today, Margot and I felt like we would focus on, what it feels like and the anxieties that come up with, being a woman alone in different places and what comes up for us.
Or even if you're not completely alone, right? But like just even feeling alone in an experience that you just had, or feeling like, hey, I'm going to be shamed or blamed for sharing that experience. Or who do I tell about what just happened? Or I know I've been in situations too where I've seen something happen. And it's like, what's my role here?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, what's my responsibility to that other woman or that other person or whatever. And I feel like so much when you were talking just now too, so much goes through, I know, my mind as a woman, just navigating being a woman in the world. Right. So like when you were talking about being alone on an elevator or sitting on a train or a subway and someone gets too close, it's like, and walking alone at night in the dark. It's like, I know, I'll just use that example. It's like years ago when I was walking back to my car from grad school. And I would always, before I left the building and like said goodbye to people, because like I knew I was going in a completely different direction every time. And everyone that was leaving the building with me was going in the opposite direction. My car was here, their car was there. And so I would prep my whole body and my mind to exit the doors, to walk like 100 feet to my car.
Yeah.
And it was like car key in between my middle and ring finger, right? Sticking out, cell phone in hand, unlocked, ready to go. It's like, this is the kind of shit that I feel like I want to believe that most men, right, do not experience. They do not have to go through all of the mental gymnastics and hoops in their mind in order to potentially feel physically and emotionally safe.
Yeah.
I
mean, I remember as you were painting that story, I remember when I moved to the city, I don't know how I got pepper spray. I have no idea. Someone gave it to me. I just know that I had it. And it was like, it was like my like safety, right? Because I remember anytime walking down the streets, and I was in Jackson Heights, Queens. It was, a fairly safe neighborhood. And even during the day, I would always have my hand in my bag with my hand on the pepper spray. most of the time it was at night, but then after someone tried to steal my cell phone in broad daylight, then I was like, well, guess I got to carry this always, and have my hand on it always. But it was like that feeling of like a little bit more safe. I have something that can kind of protect me. Right. But then it's like, yeah, like my hearing was expanding, anytime I'm walking in these situations and I feel like I can hear more, and I'm definitely like calculating and looking at people more. And, especially at night or in parking garages where no one's around, it's like I'm always listening for sounds. Is there something that shouldn't be happening in space? Or even just like, walking down the street and like men catcalling. And like, so I started doing stuff like wearing my earbuds when I lived in New York City. AirBuds, whatever they're called.
AirBuds, the name of a movie.
I would wear movie DVDs.
I think it's AirPods. AirPods.
Well, it wasn't AirPods because I didn't have those.
Right.
So I had
just earbuds.
Earbuds.
Like,
yeah. But I would wear those, but not listen to music, so that even on the subway too. So I could always pretend like I was busy doing something and that I couldn't hear people.
Yeah. I know. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go.
No, I was just going to say that, like, when you were speaking about, again, I don't know if it's just because we both, spend so much time throughout boroughs in the city or whatever, but like, I was always, depending on my mood or how I was feeling, I would either decide to never make eye contact with a person or only make eye contact with a person. It was like, I'm going to stare at this person and study their features and their face. And I want them to know that I see them. And then other times I'd be of the mindset of like, I should just look down and pretend like I'm not here.
Right.
Shrink.
Right.
And it's like, which is the correct one? Now I almost want to Google that. That'd be a good thing to Google. But you know what? I'm sure that there's a million cases of a woman or a person doing one or the other where it doesn't matter anyway. And just the fact that we have to kind of go through all of that just to sit down on a train. Right.
Do I make eye contact? Do I not? I never. I know I would. When I was on subways, I only made eye contact with women. And especially like if something felt creepy on the subway, it was like, okay, who are my allies, or who do I need to be an ally for? Right. Like it was always like, I felt like the women making, or at least I made eye contact with the women, and I wouldn't make eye contact a lot with men. But then it's funny because I remember, just as like we're saying this, like I remember, one time I was like with my ex, and we were going to his hometown, right outside of Boston. And we had like stopped at a grocery store. Right. And we're like out of New York City and I'm waiting for him outside. I can't remember all the logistics, but then this like man walks past and he smiles and says hi. And I didn't know what to do because I was like, because I was like by myself waiting for my boyfriend at the time, ex now. And I think that guy was just being friendly, but I was so used to protecting myself in the city that like I was caught off guard with this maybe friendly person.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't want it to sound like, oh, you're only in any kind of trouble if you're obviously in a very densely populated area.
Yeah.
Like, imagine being completely alone in a completely wooded or desolate area, and a person comes along that you don't expect, and they smile at you and say hi. Is that worse? Probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you just don't know. And I feel like we've been fed messages too from an early age to protect yourself. Right. And the messages are somewhat sexist to a certain extent. It's like, don't wear things that are too revealing.
Yeah.
Maybe your shirt was a little too short. Maybe you shouldn't be drinking. Maybe you should stop drinking. So in case, God forbid, something happens. It's like, I don't know. It feels simultaneously scary, but also frustrating how many rules there seem to be for girls and women in order to, once again, be completely autonomous and free with their body without feeling like we're going to get attacked, or that we had something by somebody, saying something inappropriate or disturbing or disgusting or demeaning or whatever, that somehow that could be turned around on us. Like something we did or said that like made that happen. So
yeah. No, I like what you're just saying, I mean, you casually mentioned how, when you were walking in the parking garage, you had your keys in your hands, right? That's what we were told. We were told, walk with the keys in between your fingers, so that if, someone comes up behind you or something, you can use your keys as a weapon. We were also told to, always check the back seat.
Yep.
Like, don't get in the car without checking the back seat first, and then
lock the car immediately too, as soon as you get in.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, that's what I do all the time. Like, sometimes I'm in the car with Dan and he doesn't lock the doors. And I'm like, we're locking the doors. We're locking those doors because I've been programmed that way. Lock your doors.
Yeah. I love that you use the word programmed, because I feel like so much of what we're talking about today and what we're going to be talking about in our follow-up episode is just like some of the stuff that's been deeply programmed in us.
Yeah.
Right. These conditions or this conditioning that we've been given, and not just women, right? That we were put into a box, men are put into a box, boys and girls are put into different boxes. And it's like, here's your set of rules and don't deviate. Right. Yeah. So I feel like, man, so much anxiety. We always say it, so much anxiety around all of this stuff. But I know for me, and when we were talking about it before we actually hit record, I just feel like right now I have this intense buzzing in my stomach.
Yes. Yep.
I feel like a little shaky and like a little bit breathless. And it's like, I really just wish that this audio media would be cool with me, like taking like 5 deep breaths. But, that's from my own practice separately. And I did a lot of that before we recorded, but like, even just the fact that we are feeling anxiety about talking about this topic is information right there.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, to me, it's informing me that this is some deeply unhealed shit.
Yes.
This is some scary stuff that like now I'm thinking about, not just for my own self, but for the young girls in my life, the young people, my students, my niece, just like stuff that I hope and wish and pray that they do not have to experience in the way that we did. But their conditioning can be such that they can learn from a younger age to advocate for themselves, to speak up, who to talk to, and that also that boys are being raised a little bit differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's part of my hope, is that in sharing all this, right? Like you just said, like, I'm definitely anxious right now. Like I'm feeling all that you're feeling. And part of me was like, how do we make sure that like our male listeners don't feel like, at least like, don't think I'm hating on men, because I'm definitely not, right? I am not a man hater.
Same.
But my hope is that it will at least allow them to have a little bit more insight on like what it might feel like walking as a woman in this world, walking as a girl around in this world. And, maybe, they can help our younger generations as well, to understand more about consent and boundaries and how not to be a creep. Like if you see a woman at night walking down the street, don't walk right behind her. Don't do that. Walk on the other side of the street. You can watch, you can make sure that she's safe. You can do that, but don't be a creep right behind her, because
that's true.
That's going to freak her out,
Right. I'm glad you said watch too. Cause like we need male allies, just like we need female allies. Right. Yeah. It's like you mentioned making eye contact with all the females on the subway. It's like, but if something were to happen to me, or shouldn't all the people, right? Men, women, everybody be willing to jump in and step in and advocate for that person, or say something and speak up, or even in some cases, physically disarm a person or prevent them from doing something harmful. So I'm really glad that that's definitely my hope as well. Not interested in shaming anybody for the gender that they were born into and that they embody for themselves. So yeah, I'm with you, but we're 2 women. And so we're also podcasting about anxiety. And so this was a big one for us. All right. So why don't you kick us off, Abby? Share with us a little bit about like this anxiety for you.
Yeah. So, when, as our audience probably knows, I write these outlines, and then at some point before we podcast, I think about them, right? Like what are like the ideas that what are the stories I want to share? Right. I don't like hand script it out and read from it, but I think about like, what do I want to share and how much do I want to share? And when I was looking at this outline, I just was like, wow, there are just too many stories that I can share. There's just too many. And I had a really hard time choosing the stories to share because I want to be very honest in this conversation. But I also don't want to trigger anyone sharing these stories, even though they're very, very real for me. And I'm, I'm obviously choosing my words intentionally when I share them as well. Like I'm not going to go into too much detail. But I gave a lot of thought. And so what I thought that I would start just by saying, my hope is that we just, we understand that there's so much more we don't understand about someone's lived experience than we actually do. And so I have like a number of just different stories that popped up over the years that are short, but for me worth telling because it shows just different ways anxiety comes from experiences of kind of being alone as a female in a space, right? And I'm sure these things have happened to males. I'm sure these things have happened to, people of all different ages, but I just felt like felt like I wanted to share these. So, yeah. So the first thing that came up actually when I was thinking about our theme for the week was I remembered in high school, actually it was middle school. It was in middle school and it was 7th or 8th grade. And we were doing this low ropes course thing. And it's supposed to be team building, right? For our last 7th and 8th graders to like become friends or whatever. And there was this notorious creepy health teacher. Everyone thought he was a creep. He was a creep. And he was one of the teachers in charge of our low ropes course. And we were doing this thing where we all had this rope and we had to make a triangle as a team, but we were blindfolded.
Okay.
Yeah. And all I remember was I was standing there blindfolded, holding the rope. And all of a sudden, my breast is poked. I'm like 7th, 8th grade, 12, 13 years old. And I hear him say, "Oh, oops."
Wow.
And that's it. And that, even now to this day, is just so anxiety producing for me. My peers were all blindfolded. I was blindfolded. And I have no idea what happened. I have no idea if he intentionally poked me. I have no idea if he accidentally poked me. And I was by myself. I was at the top of the triangle and everyone else was like at the bottom 2 bases. Right. And so like that has always stuck with me. Like, I don't really like being blindfolded. Right. And so even though I wasn't fully alone, we were all blindfolded kids. And so that was like one of the stories that I really remember happening. And then in college, I remembered this moment coming up where I was with a now ex, but my boyfriend at the time in college, and we were in his car. And he stopped at the apartment complex where he was living to go get something from his apartment. And I'm sitting in his car, just waiting, like just totally normal, not even sure if the locks were locked or not, right? And this guy comes out of the bushes and he stares at me and he flashes me. And it took me like moments to process what was happening. And by the time I realized what was happening, he just left.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm sitting there like freaked out. We don't really have like cell phones at this point. We had like some flip phones. Right. But there was like not, and so I'm sitting there freaked out until my boyfriend came back in the car. At that point, I'm sure I locked the doors and I just sat there like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
Right. And that also happened when I went to Amsterdam. I was with my friend and we made friends with these other women and we decided to have some special brownies and we went to the park. It's called Vondel Park. And so we're all hanging out in the park and this man pulls up on a bike and he's about like 20 feet away. Now we're in a different country and we have special brownies. So we're also young. We're like 22, 23. And all of a sudden, my friend turns to me and she's like, Ab, don't make a big deal, but look over. And I look over and he's masturbating, staring at us.
In the park.
In the park.
And he was 20 feet away?
He was 20 feet away. And it took us a moment to be like, wait, we're in a different country? Is this what they do? Like, we genuinely were like, wait, is this weird or is this not weird? And then we realized like, no, this is fucked up. And so then my friend bravely said, hey, can you go away? Like, I just remember being so impressed with her in that moment because like her voice didn't shake. She sounded like I knew she was shaking, but her voice didn't shake. She didn't give him attention. He didn't really get reactions, which we assume he wanted. And she just like was like, can you go away? And he left. Right. But all of these little things build up. And so, for me, what my go-to is to just pretend it's not happening. And so then I was thinking about how when I would work in restaurants, a lot of inappropriate stuff would go down. And I've shared before how like the male coworkers got away with more than the female coworkers in a few different restaurants I worked in. And in a different restaurant that I haven't talked about yet, the owner had his sons work there. And one of his sons was married and he would flirt with all the women. And he would come up behind me when I was waiting for the dishes to get the food to bring to the tables. And he would grab my breasts and squeeze them. And he'd be like, oh, I wish I could have this.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had to laugh it off.
How often would this happen? I have to.
I mean, I was there for over a year. I would say it probably happened less than 5 times because I would then ask the runner to go get the food, or I would make sure to avoid not being alone in certain places with this person. And, so I would laugh it off. Right. Because I was afraid of getting fired, even though like the reality is this restaurant, like they were such assholes. They stole our tips and they would pay us an hourly rate, which is actually like illegal in New York. And we never reported them. I mean, I could have reported them for sexual harassment. I could have reported them for stealing our tips, but I was in my early 20s and no one taught me about like speaking up and saying, hey, that's wrong. Right. And so I was afraid of losing my job. But honestly, I was afraid of looking dramatic. I was afraid of looking emotional. I was afraid of like not being easygoing. And it's like, oh, Abby's being uptight because we touched her. Right. And when I hear myself say that, I know, like I roll my eyes, you roll your eyes. Like when I hear myself say that, it's so sad. But that was my reality back then. I wasn't taught another way. And then like really like the last thing that I'll just share in how so many different experiences, being alone with men have shaped pretty much who I am and how I walk in the world. Another time in college, at this point, I had transferred to a different college. I was at SUNY New Paltz. And I had made friends with this girl and she had a boyfriend who was in a frat. And we went to his frat and it was in a different state. Like they went to separate schools. And I remember like, there was a lot of partying and there was like, when I say partying, I mean drinking. And the first night there, I was kind of like flirting with this one guy. We were like hitting it off. Like we like coupled off for the weekend. Right. And, we were there for like 2 or 3 days. I can't even remember. And the next evening, I remember that we were like running low on beer for beer pong and we needed a beer run. And so I went with this other frat guy. I don't know why I went. A lot of that is very hazy. And in hindsight, I shouldn't have gone. But so I went with him. And when we got back to the party, we were in the car and he tries to make a move on me. And I remember like freezing, like panicking, freezing, where I was like, oh my God, I'm in this car with this guy. You know, I'm afraid to speak up because I don't know what'll happen. So let him think I'm interested so I can bring him into the house. Right. And then once I'm in the house, I can find my friend and we can do whatever, like, you know? And so I remember like flirting with him and being like, oh yeah, like, you know, whatever it is. And a bunch of the frat guys outside saw us in the car and saw us like kissing, you know, and went back and told the other guy, you know, that I was a slut and a whore. And when I got back to the party, they all like were extremely insulting to me. And then they like stole like my gloves and like did bad things to my gloves. It was cold. So I had these cute pink Old Navy gloves that I like wore the entire time, and they like took them from me. And then, you know, I got blamed in trying to keep myself safe. Right. And so, you know, I'm just like, you know, the way that like when this came up for me, it just like when I was thinking about all of this, like so much of the way that I was navigating all of this was pretending that it didn't happen. Right. Like just pretending that my boss's son wasn't touching me. Right. And laughing it off, because what I thought was like laughing it off keeps myself safe. Right. On subways, when men would sit down next to me and like tell me I should smile and then ask me if I have a boyfriend, I would laugh it off and be friendly, but not too friendly so they think I'm leading them on. And I would always say I had a boyfriend. Right.
Yeah.
And it just like really struck me when I was thinking about this of how sad I am that, and I probably still would do it. I mean, that's the thing, is I probably still would be easygoing and laugh in certain situations because I might be afraid of getting harmed by these people, you know?
Yeah.
What happens in all of these situations is that what I feel like is, as the woman, I get blamed for these things. So like I casually like mentioned how this one guy, and I've told the story before in a different episode, how this one guy stole my phone when I was walking down the street, broad daylight, right? Broad daylight. It was 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I was going to pick up this kid that I was babysitting, and this guy stole his phone out of my hand. And I got my phone back and the cop showed up, and I just remember I was shaking. And I was like crying, but I wasn't hysterical. And I just remember I couldn't stop shaking. And now I know that was my nervous system.
Yeah.
Back then, I just thought I was like shooken up, you know, or shaken up.
Right.
But I remember the cops being like, we can't help you, you know, unless you calm down. Right. And I was able to share everything. And then the cops were saying to me how, you know, you probably shouldn't have been walking with your phone out. Right. So I'm getting blamed, and I'm being told I'm too emotional when this man attempted to steal my phone from me. Right.
They assume that now is a good time for them to educate you on how you should have been behaving.
Right.
Walking down the street at 12 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That sounds helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope the sarcasm is oozing out there.
Yeah. And so, you know, there's a lot of victim blaming, right? There's a lot of victim shaming. And then, you know, I think for me, a lot of the times I didn't speak up was because I felt like it would just be more stress speaking up and dealing with it. You know, like when I was, you know, in my college, if I had called the cops about that flasher, they probably wouldn't have caught him. They probably have had me repeat the same situation over and over and over again. They probably would have questioned me on what I could have done different. Right. If I had spoken up about that owner's son touching me, I probably would have lost my job, and I probably would have been called like uptight. Right.
Or a
If I,
liar.
or a liar, or, you know, you were flirting with him, you were asking for it, because I am a friendly person. I'm friendly. Like, that doesn't mean grab me and touch me just because I'm friendly, right? But I'm sure that I would get some of the blame, if not all of the blame, for his
Right.
behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If I had spoken up about the health teacher, because to this day I have no idea what happened, and when I think about it, it fucking creeps me out.
Yeah.
But if I had spoken up about him, they wouldn't have fired him. We had teachers that did worse shit, you know, like
Yeah.
teachers that put their hands, like smacked kids and stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't have fired him. And then he was like one of the only health teachers. I would have been stuck in his classroom for years. Yep. With like that unspoken thing that I called him out and nothing happened. Right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of like these experiences, what I've learned is it's easier to stay quiet and stay small.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wish that I could feel safe being me in every part of the world, not just my house. You know, like I just wish that, like, if someone was catcalling, which, you know, hasn't happened in recent years, but definitely happened a lot in my late teens to late 20s. I wish I could just say, like, hey, don't do that. Or, hey, when you do that, it's really creepy. Or, hey, when you do that, that makes me fear for my life. Right. Or, hey, grow up. Like, I wish I could feel safe saying something rather than ignoring it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
When men are creepy in restaurants, I wish I could just say, stop. This is unacceptable behavior. I will take you to, you know, I'll call the cops on you. I'll, you know, I don't want to say accuse of sexual harassment. What do I want to say? I mean, it is, but
yeah, I'll tell them that you sexually harassed me, or that you
right.
sexually assaulted me.
Yeah.
He assaulted
right.
you. It's
Yeah.
not just harassment at that point. He had his hands on you. So
yeah. But I wish I could have done those things. And probably now, if I was working in a restaurant and that happened, I'd be like, oh, fuck no. Right. But I'm 39. I've learned a lot. Right. And yeah, so I guess I wish I understand more about consent. Mm-hmm. I wish I understood more about it's okay to say no. I wish that I understood that even when I gave consent, I could take it back.
Yes.
That was something like I didn't know. And I didn't even get into all the times that I went on dates where men were pressuring me to do stuff. And, you know, just because I give consent for kissing doesn't mean I give consent for everything. Right. And at the time, I didn't know I'm allowed to take back consent. I didn't know, like, once you say yes, you better be all in. Right. And so I just wish I knew so much more when I was younger. Mm-hmm. But now what I'll say is like how it impacts my behavior and well-being now is like all of these stories I've shared have definitely impacted how I navigate, how I walk in the world, you know, how I am always like super hyper aware of my spaces. I'm hyper aware of how close people are to me. I'm hyper aware if someone's giving me some type of eyes or not. Right.
Yeah.
And I remind myself, like when I'm in groups, I remind myself I can let some protection and barriers down. Right. Sure. And, you know, I also like remind myself, like one of the things that I do is like, I just pre-plan ahead of time. If inappropriate stuff happens, how do I want to respond rather than my go-to of like freezing and shutting down. Right. And it would be different for different situations. But it's rough. It's hard. I still have a lot of anxiety if I'm in a parking garage. Mm-hmm. I still have anxiety if I'm walking late at night in dark. And I can't even think of the last time I've done that, honestly. I don't really do that because of the anxiety, you know, unless I'm with someone like my husband, then I feel a lot safer. You know, I still have anxiety. Like if I'm in an elevator by myself and a man walks in, right. I am like counting down the seconds, long exhales until my, you know, the door opens for my floor or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I guess my hope in sharing all this, I already said a little bit, is like, you just never know someone's experience. But my hope also is, and I'm not saying women don't do creepy shit. I am sure women have done creepy shit. I can't really think of anything creepy. I can think of like messed up shit women have done in my life, right? Betrayal.
To you, at least.
Yeah. To me, right. And like lying and stuff, but I can't really think of like creepy stuff. And so my hope is just that like we just have a little bit more empathy and compassion for not knowing everyone's lived experiences. Like we might know the major traumas, right? Maybe we don't, but we don't know like the little things people walk with every day and how that changes their behavior when they don't feel safe being themselves in the world.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's just like a million things to say.
Yeah,
So
I rambled.
I'm going to say them all. Just kidding. No, you didn't. You didn't ramble.
It was anxiety talk.
There's so much so yeah, sure. It's right. It's a little bit of a stream of consciousness, but that's because this type of anxiety, there are so many examples, as you said, and nearly every one of them. I mean, for just for some perspective, right? And you mentioned this was a handful of situations out of, I'm sure, dozens more, right?
So
just
many.
Dozens.
So many.
So many, right? Too many.
And I picked the more lighthearted ones.
Right.
Yeah.
but the greater point, I think, and what's important about all the things that you shared, regardless of how, light they may seem to some people, although many of those made me feel a good amount of rage or sadness or emotion, not just because you're my friend and I love you and I hate that anyone had made you feel like you should have been scared for your life or for your safety, or that you should laugh things off in order to keep yourself safe, or just pretend like you like it so you can potentially not get strangled by this crazy person in a car. Like, not just because of that, but because it just feels so, it's just so important, right? Everything you shared is so important, because not only for the relatable factor, because I'm sure every woman listening has experienced some level of this, if not all of it, but because if at the end of the day, we're speaking to try to heal these parts of ourselves and our past and sort of, figure out, or with as much compassion as we can, look back reflectively and think, I wish. You said that a lot throughout your story. I wish I would have this. I wish I knew that this was okay. I wish. And it's like, I think the greater goal from everything you shared is to hopefully show people with your powerful stories that you don't have to wish. You could just do it. You could just do it now. Like, and I want to go back to part of your story where you shared about your friend, sort of, even though you knew she was anxious, looking at, maybe not looking at the person, but looking in their general direction, and with every bit of power that she could muster, saying, can you please go away? Like, and how that impacted you. Right. And maybe if you had been able to witness and be privy to more instances of bravery like that, you might have learned to speak up for yourself at a younger age. Maybe not. Right. And I also want to acknowledge that everything that you did in order to keep yourself safe is fucking priceless. It is. It's priceless, because your safety is of the most paramount, right? It's the most important thing. You're here to tell everything you just shared. And I know it's not the worst shit you've experienced, but you're here to share regardless. You're here to help serve and be a person in the world. And so I just want to sort of acknowledge too, that like, don't hate on yourself for the stuff that you did to keep yourself safe. And like, you can wish for things all day long, but that stuff's gone. And so like, the hope is kind of just like, who are you now? Who are you going to continue to be? Who are you going to work towards being? And then when you're with people you coach, when you're with, students and parents or whoever, what are you going to say to them to help them help their kids and teens and college age people to be louder, right? To speak the fuck up.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
go
on.
No, I live. One of my favorite podcasts is Crime Junkie. I mean, it's like, and so much of the stuff we shared, it's like shit you hear about in like SVU episodes, right? But that's the crap that we deal with all the time. So like, it's funny and it's not funny at all, and it's relatable, but it shouldn't be, right? But they always say this thing. They say, "Be weird, be loud, stay alive." Right. And it's, to me, it's so powerful. It's like, I want that
Yeah.
tattooed in my fucking face. It's like,
Yeah.
be weird, be loud, stay alive. Like, that is the most important thing. So we shouldn't downplay all the things that we wish we would have known or done differently, but that you did everything you could to get out of some situations. And even though you couldn't get yourself out of every single one of them because creepy people, you got yourself out of some of them. Right.
Yeah.
And the most angering part is that you had to think about it at all. The other thing I noticed, right. The other thing I noticed in so much of what you shared is how much, and we kind of talked about this on the top, how much strategizing has to go into stuff in the moment, and how a lot of your story had to do with, like, you didn't even know some things were happening. And thankfully they were quick before you were able to process it. And then by the time you processed it, it was over.
Yeah.
But what if it escalated? What if it got worse? What if that person that, was really far away and exposed himself to you in that car saw you, notice him, and said, "Oh, there's my invite. There's my invitation. I'm coming over now."
Right.
So, like, yeah, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. No, but it's so much mental gymnastics, like you said.
Right.
Earlier.
The strategizing. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's for all people, for women, especially, at least from my lived experience as well, to have to try to come up with all the possible scenarios before it even happens.
Yeah.
Just from standing in an elevator.
Yeah.
For 2 floors, just from, walking 20 feet to your car. It's like, how much thought has to go into these daily, seemingly mundane tasks?
Yeah.
Trying to walk down the street at 12 p.m. and not have your phone stolen. Like, obviously that's nothing to do with necessarily being a female, but it is to a certain extent. It's like, would that guy have stolen a phone from a 6'5" giant person, a giant man, or like an athlete or something? Like, maybe, but probably not. Yeah. Right. There's assumptions that are being made. And I just love that you kind of talked about how you've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Right. You've learned a lot. Yeah. You're 39. I'm 39. And so that's going to be a little bit part of what I share too. It's like, I have plenty of shoulda, woulda, couldas, but if even one person listening who's not 39, who's younger or older, whatever, can sort of take the wishes that you had, right? The shoulda, woulda, couldas, and put that into action. Right. Speak up, be loud, be weird, ask the person the question, like, tell them they're making you uncomfortable. Right. And, what's the worst that could happen? They call you an icy, frigid bitch. Okay. You nailed it.
Right.
Nailed it. That's me. Right.
Exactly.
It's like all the fear that I heard, right, that you had. It's like, I don't want to be labeled as this. I don't want to be victim blamed. I'm going to lose my job. And all that was very real in the moment. Right. But like in the rear view, right. I know I guess tell us like, if that same exact thing happened, like, what would you say to this person? If this happened to you today and you were working at a restaurant and the boss's son grabbed you, and what's 39-year-old Abby going to say?
Probably, are you fucking kidding me? And then I would probably like throw him off or whatever. And I would make sure someone else saw it or whatever. And if they didn't, like, and I would go report that shit right away.
Exactly.
I mean, that's But like especially in the restaurants, there's something about working in a restaurant and how like behavior is accepted, like that wouldn't be accepted in other places. And like in a different restaurant, because I worked in a lot of restaurants, in a different restaurant, there was these 2 married men. They weren't married with each other. They had wives, and they were both married, and they were both cooks. And they definitely would, the girls would have to go downstairs. The waitresses would have to go down to the cellar to get stuff sometimes. And they would follow us down and like try to kiss us. And then the moment we would be like, fuck off, because we would say fuck off then, right? They'd be like, I'm just kidding. I'm married, but like,
but if you'd been down, they would have kissed you.
Yes. There was always this pushing, always this, and that was different. It was a little bit more, I mean, it was creepy, but it wasn't forceful. Right. So in that sense, we could be like, what the fuck are you doing? And,
yeah, right.
But even then there was the mental gymnastics of like, oh, I should only go down when they're busy cooking.
Right. It's like, when am I going to be the most safe to do my job in this part of the restaurant?
Yeah. And so like when you were sharing just about like, how we are teaching others, we work with people's kids and everything, like the one thing that like when I teach kids of all ages, like that I'm so passionate about is teaching them about consent and teaching them both parties, like it's okay to take away consent. Right. And I model that in the classes, and we like practice it over and over, like back in the day when we would all like do partner yoga together. And it's the checking in with each other. How does this feel for you? Do you want me to, give you more pressure or less? And like this constant checking in and asking for consent was my way of really hoping that kids would understand, like they can say, no, they don't want to do this. They can say they want to do it and then change their minds. Right. Yeah. Or they can say they want it and they like it, like whatever it is.
Yeah. Right. It's the learning.
Yeah.
Right. It's the communication that you didn't have, that we didn't have growing up.
Yeah.
Right. And that you, especially with authority figures.
Yeah.
And so like bosses, teachers, like you talked about the health teacher, it's like, and if you already kind of felt like you knew the outcome before it happened, that's a not you problem, right?
Right.
That's a school problem. That's a society problem.
Because that's the other part is we know when women come out and speak up.
Yep, exactly. What happens?
They get death threats. They get shamed. They get blamed for what happened. And nothing often happens with the men.
Yeah, and they're being all the people that are doing the assaulting and the raping, they're being given the benefit of the doubt more often than not, right?
Yeah.
And that's when all the questions for women come in. Well, were you doing this? Oh, you were wearing
Did you drink too much?
Should you have been drinking? Yeah. I mean, not even did you drink too much? Should you have been drinking?
Right.
It's like, I'm sorry. It's like, I'm a consenting adult. I'm, of legal age. Yeah. I mean, it's so sick. It's so infuriating. I feel like, I guess my final question for you is just like, if somebody were to have been able to witness some of this stuff, and you didn't really speak on if there were other people that saw, this person grab your breast from behind or whatever, or if anyone else was kind of privileged to witnessing some stuff. If somebody could have spoken up for you, right? Like, how do you think that would have changed things for you? Do you think it would have, do you think you would have maybe found your own power or voice earlier or stronger? Do you think that it would have made little to no difference, and then what could they have said, if anything, that might have been the most supportive?
So if we're talking about like in my early and mid 20s, right? I think that deep down, I would have appreciated someone standing up for me. But I also just so wanted to be liked and be a people pleaser and not be dramatic and not have things be made into too big a deal. Right. And so I would have downplayed it. And I did downplay it. I let all that stuff slide, even though it was unacceptable. And it didn't even bother me that much. I just learned like, okay, have the runner get the food, right? Like, if I don't want this, then I have to change my behavior. Right. But I didn't want to, like we're told, don't make a big deal out of shit. Right. And then we're made fun of or whatever for making a big deal. Oh, you're just, you're so dramatic. You're too sensitive. Right. Yep. And so I think in my early and mid 20s, I would have been like, no, it's okay. Let it go. We're all just joking. We're all just playing. Right. I would have, I'm sure in some ways I would have wanted to like protect the other person from them feeling embarrassed or ashamed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's so convoluted. It's just so like crazy making. But in probably like my very late 20s, early 30s, and now I would be like, fuck yeah, thanks for being an ally, and like, thanks for pointing out to me that this stuff is fucked up. Right. Like, right. Because there's still so many layers of people pleasing, and being likable keeps me safe. right? And not making a big deal keeps me safe. And so, you know, and it also depends, like, you know, is it at night and there's one other person? Are we in a group? Like, there's so much different context to what I would like. But I mean, nowadays it's like, yeah, speak the fuck up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for being an ally, you know, when someone's being creepy.
I find the most interesting thing about what you just said is like, if somebody were to have stood up for you, you would have potentially, at least years ago, would have said like, oh no, don't worry about it, we're all just joking. It's like you basically wouldn't have taken the help, right? Basically, right? Because you don't, then it's just like, oh God, now that this person's calling it out when I didn't have this, you know, understanding of the strength to, or whatever. And now I better pretend, because I don't want to be too fill in the blank, too sensitive, dramatic, you know, make a big deal out of things, too uptight, whatever.
And then be ostracized. Because that's the thing. When everyone's hanging out, joking together, you're part of a group. And oh, we can't joke with Abby now. She's too uptight. Right. And then you're just ostracized from the community. And that feels fucking shitty. Right.
I just want, like, the best part about this is that, like, if you're out there listening and you witness something wrong, you know, inappropriate, whatever, it's blatant, it's in your face, and you decide to say something, even if that person says, oh no, don't worry about it. Know that there's a chance that they're just trying to play off what happened, right? And keep fighting for them. Say, no, I was witness to that, and that wasn't okay. I'm not okay with what I just saw. Right. So, like, you don't have to be quiet just because that person's trying to shrug it off either. Right. And it's like, or at least then maybe have a conversation with that person later if you feel comfortable too. Like,
like if someone had pulled me aside one-on-one, I mean, even in my early and mid 20s, I probably wouldn't have fully heard it. Right. But if someone, because it would have made me uncomfortable knowing that that was so wrong. Right. It would have made me uncomfortable. And then what do I do? How do I navigate that? And, but if someone had pulled me aside and educated me, like, you know, you're not just some object for people to grab, you know, and explained it to me in a way, like, then I would have been like, oh my God, thank you so much for pointing this out. You know, I don't know how to act, but I appreciate this knowledge moving forward because maybe I can set better boundaries. Right. So I like that other piece too, because maybe calling it out, I would have felt like I needed to protect the group. Right. But if someone pulled me aside and explained and had a conversation and planted that seed, that could have helped me. You know?
No, it's just, I think it's just such an important part of the conversation of this conversation, because at the end of the day, we should all be trying to troubleshoot the best way for us to keep surviving and navigating and showing up for each other in the best way that we can in the world, regardless of, you know, gender or identify, you know, how we identify or whatever. I mean, it's just good life lessons for how to navigate being an ally, standing up for others, advocating for yourself.
Right.
And these are things that, and I'm glad you said too, it's like you maybe wouldn't have even really heard it. And I could totally relate to that. It's like your brain's not ready to understand something it's not ready to understand. Like, I must have asked my mom like 17 times when I was really little if Santa Claus was real. And she kept telling me, you know, some kind of like half story about like how he used to be real, right? He's based on a real man, Saint Nicholas. And, you know, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Right. I was kind of like, okay, cool. And then like I went back to playing, like, you know, but then once my brain was ready to hear it and understand it, it's like, oh man, this thing wasn't real this whole time. You know, I mean, that's a ridiculous example, but
just sometimes you're not ready to hear things until you're ready to hear them.
them. And so just to be as compassionate and loving to yourself as you can.
You know, I think like my last thought just in my story, and then I'm you know, very curious. I won't say excited to hear yours like I usually say, curious to hear yours. I just feel like my hope in one of the takeaways is to understand that sometimes, I'll say women, but I'm sure this applies to all people, might appear nice and easygoing as a way to keep themselves safe. Right. And so if someone is appearing nice and easygoing, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they want to be part of that situation. And I'm like, meaning that like on subways or in restaurants, or you see a woman at a bar, read her body language. She might be appearing nice to this man that's speaking to her, right? But she might be doing that as a way to keep herself safe, right?
Yeah.
And body language says a lot. So I guess, I just, my hope is that even though it might appear like someone is being nice,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that they're comfortable.
And teach body language from a young age.
Yeah. Right.
Start communicating this stuff so that way your children and your students or whoever know, like from a young age, oh, this is the way I communicate how I feel. This is the way I practice noticing what's going on with my thoughts in my body. This is the way I can, get curious about what I see in somebody else's, energy or their body or their how they're behaving.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do I ask that person questions about how they're doing,
Right.
and all that, if all that stuff can be communicated and taught to the younger generation, as we're saying, could make all the difference. Hopefully. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing everything. It's
yeah. I mean, I'm a
so
important.
like,
oh, I rambled and this is gonna, but whatever. It's
honestly, again, you know how I feel about it. So I won't, I won't placate your anxiety about rambling.
That's all right. I'm okay. So let's hear some of your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the stuff that we've been saying already, so much of your story landed for me. Obviously, I never worked in any restaurants. I've never been in Amsterdam, right? But like so many of those things happened to me pretty much verbatim or exactly. Like I've been flashed many times. I've been groped. I've been grabbed. I've been, I've been victim blamed. I've been called a bitch. I've been called uptight, all the things basically.
Tease.
What?
Tease.
Yeah. All the things.
Yeah.
From a young age too. Yeah. That's the other thing. And I think, so like what I'm going to share is going to be a few different small stories too, kind of like you. And it's like going back to how we're saying that we really weren't taught how to show up as a girl or a woman when we were being raised. Aside from just like, cross your legs when you sit, like little, like considerate things or like things that were considered, correct for girls. But as far as like showing up in a world filled with people that are going to expect things from you, people that want things, I may not say they want them, they might just try to take them or whatever, so I remember the first story I wanted to share was when I was 11, my mom or my dad, I can't remember who, had dropped off the car to a repair place. And, a few hours later, I get a phone call and I was 11 years old. So I answered my family's house phone and, I said, hello. And, a male voice came on and he told me the car was ready to be picked up. And I was like, okay, like I'll tell my mom, basically. Was like, that was the crux of it. I think my mom was like outside. She was in the house, but she like wasn't, right there with me. And I go, okay. And then he started a conversation with me and it was like, so what's up? How are you? What are you doing right now? And I was 11. And now, to be fair, right, generally, he didn't know how old I was. I've always had sort of a deeper tone to my voice. I've always sounded like I wasn't like this, tiny little voiced girl. Like I've always kind of had this like tenor to my voice. So he thought I was like 18 and he told this, later on. So I remember feeling immediate discomfort, but I didn't understand why. I just did. Like, I just felt like I knew deep down this person shouldn't be asking me these questions. And so like, I really didn't know how to show up and answer them. I was kind of like, I'm good. I'm just hanging out. Or I don't even think I used that language. Like, I truly don't remember. I just remember feeling really uncomfortable. And so like, he wasn't really getting much out of me. Right. So after about another minute or two, he said, all right, bye, got off the phone. And so my mom came in the house, or she came up the stairs or wherever. And she was like, what's going on? And I said, the car's ready. And then I told her, I was like, the guy asked me this question and this. So like, my mom and I are very close and we've always been close. And I told her the few questions he asked me and she like lost her mind.
Yeah.
She lost it. She was like, what? she was like, oh my God. So she calls the shop immediately, or she may have called my dad first, actually, to tell him. And then she calls the shop and like demands to speak to the guy. She was like, who just called this? You know, my name is this, who just called? I want to speak to them. And so she wound up talking to the owner first and told them this person was asking my 11-year-old inappropriate questions about what she was doing, about her life, about her, you know, I don't remember everything, but like I knew it was wrong, some of the stuff he asked me.
Right.
And so, you know, he got on the phone and like it was to them, it was all just a misunderstanding, right? It was like, oh, I thought she was older, as if that would have made it okay.
No,
right?
God.
Right. It's I thought she was older. I thought she was 18. And the guy who was, you know, one of the assistants or whatever, he was young, maybe in his early 20s. And he actually, this was a little traumatizing to me. He wanted to speak to me to apologize.
No.
But I wound up on the phone, and I feel like I wound up feeling guilty. Like I should allow this person to apologize for speaking to me inappropriately. And again, as an 11-year-old, I had zero ability to like express how I was really feeling, you know, not really able to process any of this. I was just knew it was wrong. He apologized, and like everyone went on with their lives.
Yeah.
And then like, but this is something, I mean, this is, you know, so many years ago. And I'm like, this was the first story that I thought of like how, when I sat down to think about this, it was like, what's the earliest memory I have of like being sort of looked at or viewed as like someone to flirt with or as a sexual being or something. Right. And so, yeah. And then, you know, when I was a teen, I was on the train with my dad. I was going with him to work. And I think it was like a bring your daughter to work day type thing. I must have been like 14, 15 at most. And this is pre-cell phone. So like I was just sitting like with my book or something, and my dad had the newspaper, and it was a packed early morning train to Manhattan, you know, for the workday. And after about 15 minutes, you know, a man was sitting to my left. My dad was by the window. I was sitting in the middle, and then a person sat next to me. And then we maybe 2-3 minutes went by, and my dad's like, we're going to switch seats. And like, he didn't say why, right? So we're going to get up. So I'm like, okay. So with my book down, we walk to another seat, and I go, what happened? Like, why did we move? And he goes, I just didn't, that man was looking at you. He was looking at you weird. He wasn't looking at you right. He was looking at your body, your legs. I was like, okay. And, you know, when my dad's so like, I certainly, but I didn't see it. Right. But so just getting this information kind of secondhand almost, I was like, it was almost worse. It was weirder because it was like, oh my God, that happened. And I didn't even notice. Right. So then I kind of had this anxiety of like, is that always happening? Should I be looking at every single, like, and so it was like one of the first early windows of like, I better be staring into everyone's face. I better be looking around and be a lot more conscious of my surroundings.
Yeah.
Another quick story was, you know, I had walked around the corner to CVS, was really close to my parents' house. And, on the way back, someone had left the store right behind me and followed me home. And thankfully they stopped at my driveway, at my walkway to the front door. And just, I knew they were following me, right? I could tell they weren't that far behind, you know? And so like, I was conscious of them being there, but at the same time, I didn't want to like break out into a run. I kind of was in like, I don't know what to do. Again, pre-cell phone, didn't have anything to kind of like, you know, anchor me to anything. And it was just running around to a quick errand. So by the time I reached the corner of my house, my parents' house is on the corner, I like really was like doing like a half jog. And so by the time I reached the front door, he had just kind of like probably had just caught up at that point and just stopped at the start of the walkway. And I just like looked at him. He looked at me and just stood staring at me for a good like 30 seconds and then kept walking. But like I was already in the house. And so I just closed the door. I locked it, you know, I ran and like, just like, you know, probably called my best friend, like, oh my God, this thing happened, you know, but didn't, again, like it didn't fully register what was going on with a lot of the stuff. And then obviously as a college student and in my 20s through my mid 20s, it was all like, similar experiences to what you went through. For me, the biggest ones were always on the dance floor. I was a huge dancer.
Oh my God. Yeah.
We went out. I would go out with my dance team all the time, and just like, then people knew us as a group, and it was like, oh, it's the dance. And so like people would literally just assume everyone here wants to dance with me. Right. And so like the constant was just being groped from behind, being like, held from behind too, like held physically in a spot. And so like, again, with no language or anything, that I've reached that point where I was just kind of like, I would become more physical though. So I didn't say anything to people. I didn't speak up, but I would push, I would punch, I would kick. Like I would like on purpose, I'd slam on a person's toes.
Good.
Right. I was like, ooh, and then they would back off. Right. I'd punch them in the genitals and they'd back off. And it was like, oh, this works. Right.
Yeah.
So again, no real verbal communication.
Right.
I'm not actually saying, don't do that. Stop. Don't touch me. Like whatever. I'm just kind of like,
Right.
this is my way of telling you, get the fuck off of me.
Right.
Yeah. So like, as I grew, again, like you made that comment, it was just like, oh, then now I'm 39. And so here's what I would have done. Here's what I could have done. Here's what I wish I would have known or done differently. It's like, when statements are made to me, when interactions make me uncomfortable, when something is said, when anything, like my mentality is less about the anger and the nonverbal and more about some of the anger still, right? Or I'm very happy that I feel like I've found like a strength in my own voice to be like you said, like, no, I'm not going to accept that.
Yeah.
And just being able to stand up for myself and others and be able to see things and say things and say, I don't have to allow things to happen to me. I can have some control over them. And they have nothing to do with how I'm dressed or what I'm wearing or what I could have or should have been doing, like in my behavior. And so I try to have more of my interactions now when they're uncomfortable or they're weird. And like you had said, like, I'm not getting catcalled in the way that I once was, which is kind of sad at the same time. It's like, oh man, it's like, here's that person pushing 40. Like, no, people aren't looking at me the same. And that's cool. I'm good with that. I don't have the energy because I don't have the energy. Right. That's almost sad too. It's like, I don't want to be catcalled, but I also don't have the energy for that. It's like, it's just such a weird way of feeling. Right. It's like, I don't want you to think of me that way at all, but I also don't want to get old. So like there's that. Although
that's the trade-off. When you're young, you get catcalled.
Getting old means I'm alive. So I guess that's cool. But like, yeah, I mean, and even just simple things like that. Like I remember I was leaving a bachelorette party, this was pretty recently, like 4 or 5 years ago. And police officers, all like 5 of them whistling at me. I'm like, really? It's like, you're the ones doing this.
Right.
Like talk about authority figures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, right. The message was always, the message was nothing really. There was no conversation around what to do, when to do it. Right. And so like, I learned to just listen and go with the flow.
Yeah.
Or be physical. Right. Which was just somehow easier for me. Especially if you're on top of me, my instinct, right, takes over to just like smack, kick, like move, to physically remove a person from my space. And then what I've come to learn is like, actually, my words are a lot more powerful. Actually, my voice is strong, even when I'm shaking, right? And it's like, I really resonated with that person because that would have been me, maybe not in my early 20s, but not that long after, honestly. By my late 20s, I was that person, So like, I'm happy about that, but it would have been helpful to have more explicit types of communication for dealing with creepers, for dealing with being alone in a space with men, with anybody,
right?
But with men and how to show up and navigate it. So I think part of my practice now is just to ask more questions of people, right? Ask about their intentions, tell them when they make me upset or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Ask them if their intention was to do so. And usually it's not. And then on those moments where, you get called like, you're just uptight. You're just a bitch. You're just rigid. You're just whatever. Oh, cool. Like I kind of I've reached a place where I was like, yeah, you nailed it. Like, cause I don't care. I don't care if you like me. I really don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So many things. So the first thing is like, as you shared your stories, more stories popped up in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's probably what's going to happen with our listeners is hearing these is going to make them think of all the different things in their life. So, hopefully y'all have some time after this to like take some breaths or shake it out. I'm probably going to have to shake it out because when you were sharing your stories, it reminded me of more of mine, but it also made me angry, disgusted. I wanted to vomit and hurt people, during your stories. One of the things that really actually made me angry was how when that guy, when you were 11, wanted to apologize to you on the phone, like the message was he needs to feel better. So you need to accommodate him, even though he made you feel uncomfortable. You need to make him feel better by letting him apologize so he can redeem himself.
Exactly.
And in a way, and you're 11, so you should have known better. I'm not saying that, but in a way it was similar to like in my 20s, how I would have protected the offender, right? Totally. Let's make sure he can feel comfortable with his behavior, and so you like in some form learn that at 11, right?
Yeah.
Not saying
I don't remember if like, I'm pretty sure it wasn't like you have to talk, like my mom would have said,
no.
But I also didn't have the ability. I didn't feel like I could say no, right? It was like, he'd like to apologize to you. And like the phone was handed towards me and I was kind of like, well, what are my options? Do I just walk away? Do I say, no, I don't want to do it? Like in the moment I was so like confused, I think more than anything else.
Right. I mean, you were a kid.
Okay. Yeah.
And it doesn't sound like someone forced you to accept the apology, but as a kid, what are you going to say? Right. You can't even figure out exactly what's
Didn't
wrong.
know what happened.
Yeah. Right. So, it's just like that really stuck out to me. And then like the person following you from the grocery store, right? Like I was there. I was feeling the like need to feel calm, cool, collected. Everything's okay. Don't freak out. Why would you freak out anyway? And then like the feeling of relief the moment you got to your house. Like I was just like on that journey with you.
Yeah. I can still see it.
Yeah.
See it.
Yeah. I could see it. And I don't even know the area that you're talking about. Like, yes. Yeah. And then, one of my questions is, just like, I was just curious when you were sharing about the police officers and the bachelorette party. What did you do? Did you ignore them? Did you say something?
I turned around and I laughed and I said, seriously?
Yeah.
And they all, well, I mean, not they all, a couple of them just like laughed back, right? Like, and then a couple of them looked a little uncomfortable because I think I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to believe that I was the only person really in the vicinity. And so it wasn't like, I might be confusing that verbal behavior to another woman or person in the area. But like I'm a fast walker. And so I had taken several steps past them before I like decided to do something about it, to say something, because they waited until I was almost past them. Right. Cause it's almost as if like they knew probably just on some level, we shouldn't do this, but we're going to, or maybe one of them did. And so the other one's just kind of like joined in or whatever. And so they didn't want me to see them. Otherwise they would have done it before I had fully approached. Right. Because they had been watching me come toward them to walk past. And then they waited until I was like, maybe like almost to the end of them. There was like 4 or 5 before somebody, before the noise came. And then I took maybe like 3, 4 or 5 more steps. And then I was like, seriously?
Yeah.
And then I just turned back around and kept walking. So like, I wasn't going to go back and be like, can you tell me about your intention behind that? Cause then it's that exhaustion that we feel as women too. Like, I don't have time to deal with every douchebag that's out there making me feel uncomfortable. There's just no time.
Now I have 2 follow-up questions. I'm going to ask them both. The first one is, how did it feel knowing that you were going to be walking past a group of men, even though they're like police officers? right? That's the first question, because that is another anxiety when it's just me on the street and it's a group of men. I definitely feel anxiety. I feel like all my senses are heightened.
Yeah.
And then my second question is, if they were not cops, do you think you would have reacted the same?
That's a good question. I felt fine walking past them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was just I was in a good mood, you know, like whatever. It was again, this was like the next morning. It was like 10, 11 o'clock, you know. I was just trying to head back to the train, and I felt fine. I don't remember feeling any discomfort or anxiety from walking past them. And maybe it's because they were police officers. So I assumed that like they're going to be on their best behavior because they're working. It's not even like they're off duty or something like, excuse me. But, and then if they weren't, I want to say that I probably wouldn't have said anything and I just would have kept walking. But I almost felt braver saying,
yeah,
seriously, because to me it was because they were on duty police officers,
right?
That was the part that was like, really, you guys, like that was the part for me that I felt safer, almost like calling them out on that, because it's like you're supposed to be, well, again,
here to protect
a
and
separate
serve.
conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, and that's, I mean, that's the thing is like, it's just like, how often do we wish we could speak up? How often do we wish we could say something? But if it wasn't police officers, you might have just been silent and walked past.
Right. More fearful.
Yeah. More fearful. Right. And how often does that just happen? Every single fucking day.
Yeah.
For so many people. Right. Like, it's just like, it's like a constant anxiety because you just don't know when someone might react in an unsafe way if we spoke up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you feel now?
Okay. I don't know. I still have a good amount of anxiety.
Me too.
I feel a little bit better, but I just feel like this topic it's just this topic. This topic feels heavy.
Yeah.
It feels weighty. And so I still feel like that. I feel a little bit better, but I still feel like a little bit of discomfort and anxiety talking about all this, even though I know it's important and I know needs to be said.
Right. Right. I mean, I feel a teeny bit lighter. But also, and I mean, even though I'm really just angry and sad hearing your stories, I still very much like feel, I don't know what word I want to say. I don't know the word I want, but I just feel, I don't know the emotion either, but I appreciate you sharing because it's not spoken about enough about all the things we carry every single day. And, you know, being a woman and having to be like pleasant and not make a big deal in all the ways that like anxiety provoking things happen. And we just have to kind of like deal with it. Just fucking deal with it, you know?
Right.
And so I appreciated hearing your story because even though I know women go through this all the time, I know that, it still made me feel less alone in my own stories.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is that, you know, we're both the same age. We both, you know, are in this generally the same line of work. We both came of age at the same time. Like, so we have a lot of, shared lived experiences, but as you kind of said earlier, that's like, you really don't know what everyone's everything is. You don't know what everyone's lived experiences. And I'm glad we're kind of wrapping up on this note because like, I feel like, and even as I know for me as a white cisgender woman, right? The way I navigate being a woman in the world is obviously extremely different from the way a BIPOC woman does, from the way a transgender woman does, from the way that anyone that's non-binary. I mean, so I just feel like, and I feel somewhat privileged in a way too, being able to speak about advocating and being able to yell at cops, right? Not yell at them, but
right.
yell seriously to them. Because
Right.
if some, you know, if a Black woman were to do that, they'd probably might be arrested or questioned or whatever. And so it's like being a person, I just want to acknowledge the privilege that I feel like I have too, because yes, you and I are talking a lot about advocating and speaking up, and it's not as easy though for everybody. It's like we're here sharing our personal experiences as who we are, because that's all we can speak on. We can't speak to the struggle of others. But I just didn't want to finish this episode without acknowledging that and going unsaid, because there are just too many women, right? Women in general, but too many women of color that are not believed, that are being torn down, that are being blamed in ways that you and I don't even understand.
Right.
You know?
Right.
It's heartbreaking and wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why more of us do need to be talking about this shit regularly.
Yeah. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all I can think in my mind is just like, it's just so fucked. It's so fucked up.
We found the name of our episode, everyone.
Like, it's like mine and your stories are so fucked up, and yet they're only our lived experiences, and
only a small part.
It's only it's just, it's fucked up. Yep.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. Well,
which
one of us are going to bring this back around? You know, I don't think we're going to share a win of the week for this episode.
Yeah,
really
I feel like,
and maybe we acknowledge why.
Maybe our win is that we finally made this episode.
Okay.
Because we have been putting this off because we felt really uncomfortable with it.
Okay, that's perfect. Because I'm like thinking, I have nothing good to say right now. Like, I don't want to. We can't like share some happy fucking thing right now. That'd be really weird. Be really weird to do. So okay. All right. Okay, so we have a Mabby win of the week.
Yeah.
And it is simply that we showed up for this episode today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really it.
We finally tackled this topic. Well, I won't even say tackled, because it's nowhere. We just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah, exactly. We just scratched the surface, and we don't know when we'll scratch more of the surface even.
Right. But we were putting it off.
Yeah.
And we decided it was time.
Yeah. It is.
So
time.
That is our win. It is time. Mufasa.
Say it again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, it feels good. I'm so glad that we just did that, because it just feels really good to be silly and laugh and be back to like our generally fun-loving selves at the end of this episode.
And I mean, I think that really encapsulates, living with anxiety, is that it is heavy. It is very uncomfortable, and yet we can still find lightness and joy in everyday living.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So good. So well said. So we're glad that we did this. We're proud of ourselves. We're happy that we tackled a sticky, uncomfortable topic that we certainly were uncomfortable talking about.
Yep.
We hope that everyone listening was able to receive any message that their heart was meant to receive today. You know, I don't want to say, here's what you should reflect on this week. I mean, I feel like we've already kind of given you hopefully so many things to think about throughout this conversation. And I feel like we don't usually give you as many reflection points during our chat as we do at the end. So I think we should just leave all you warriors with our deep thanks and gratitude for being with us this week and every week, of course. If you want to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram. We're at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. If you'd like to shoot us an email, you can do so at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. Throw us your topic ideas, your wins of the week. Share with us your thoughts on this episode or any of our episodes. Or if you think you'd be an awesome fit as a guest on our show, please reach out. Let's connect, get you on the calendar. And please take 2 seconds, smash that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you are listening. You can find us on YouTube. Like and subscribe to our channel over there. Every episode is uploaded over there as well. And head on over to our show notes and jump on our Threadless shop. We've got some awesome Anxiety Warriors podcast merch. Recovering People Pleaser. That's a good one for today. That's one of our favorites. Yeah. Some cool 80s and 90s style designs. And And of course, sending you all the sparkle and shine and all the twinkles this week, warriors.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us today on this episode and going on this journey with us. We are definitely so grateful you all are here.
Till next time.